Welcome to the UNSECURITY podcast. Each week, Evan and Brad give an inside look at current information security news, breaches, best practices, and other things you should know to improve your information security. Here are your hosts, FRSecure's Evan Francine and Brad Nye.
Good morning. Today is June 3rd. By the way, Evan, how is it already June 3rd? June already.
June. I know. Yeah, what?
It's nuts.
So
like almost halfway through the year already.
It is June?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right.
All right. Well, it's time for another episode of the UNSECURITY podcast. I'm Brad Nye, and I'll be hosting this week. And with me again, as you heard, is Evan. Good morning, Evan.
Good morning. It's good to be here. Huh? Monday. The weather's beautiful.
It is gorgeous. This could be like 80 degrees every day this week.
Can we do the podcast from outside?
I think it'd be great.
How do we do it?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, maybe not.
We'll figure it out. Anyway. So what'd you do over the weekend, Evan?
Probably about the same thing you did. We had nice weather, and I'm 48 years old, so my body doesn't do the stuff it's supposed to do, I don't think. Well, maybe it does at this age. I, what do you call that? Stained a fence. Mm-hmm. My daughter helped me. She's 14. It was really cool.
Were you doing like the Karate Kid with her? Wax on, paint up and down?
No, she's not ready for karate. Well, maybe she is. I don't know. They did that, cleaned gutters, mowed the lawn. Yeah. A lot of work around the house.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking before. Did a lot of work outside. And then I was doing some painting. My wife was like, all right, I got to get rid of, I can't stand the builder paint anymore. She couldn't stand it. So
do you have the original paint?
It was the original.
That kind of like eggshell
tan, like that.
Thing?
No, like the kind of like the tannish, generic color. And she's like, I'm done. So I was painting all weekend, and
I hate painting.
My arms hurt, and
I hate painting. I hate staining fences too.
Very similar.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is no fun for either of us this weekend.
Well, yeah, I had some fun after that. I had some friends over. We had a birthday party for one of my buddies and lit some stuff on fire.
Oh, that's always fun.
I live in a small town, so we can't like blow things up. But if I lived on a farm, we would have done that.
It's probably for the best.
I don't know. I like blowing stuff up. Tannerite or something. I don't know. Propane tank. Well, I've never shot a propane tank. What would that be like?
It feels that I don't know.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Anyway,
I have some friends who live in the country. I could try that.
You're not far from it.
I'm not. No, it would be cool to. I don't know.
All right,
it's weird.
Well, there you go. That's our exciting weekend.
Is that our intro? our intro.
Our exciting weekend was yard work and painting and staining and.
Yeah. Security life isn't as sexy as it appears, is it?
No.
I did tweet some stuff. Oh, I tweeted, you saw Kevin Poulsen. He doxed the dude the guy who created the Pelosi drunk video, the fake video.
Yeah, the fake one? No, I didn't see that.
Kevin Poulsen doxed the dude on, what's his news site? I can't remember. But that sort of ticked me off. Kevin Poulsen should know better than that. I mean, we don't dox people because of their political leanings, especially something like that. I mean, the guy's a forklift driver, for crying out loud. But anyway, read up on that.
No, I hadn't seen that. That's interesting.
I'm not a big Kevin Poulsen fan anyway, but, you read that and you're like, man, any respect I had for you is sort of gone now.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
So, yeah, read up on that. So I commented on yesterday, and I was expecting a bunch of, because it's like politically charged, right? Anything with politics nowadays, you just sort of expect fallout. Somebody to just give you a bunch of crap, no matter which side of the fence you fall on. Nobody has any tolerance for anybody anymore. That's that.
Yeah. Fun.
So what else is new? What's our show today?
We're talking incident response.
What?
I know. We don't have any of those ever.
You had how many last week did you have?
Just one.
Just one.
Just one. But
deferred
to today. I know. Anyway, we'll talk about that. So I wanted to start with your Denver ISSA workshop that you did a couple weeks ago, Incident Management, Panic or Plan.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. I looked at all the material that you had.
Well, first off, that Denver ISSA chapter is awesome. I mean, I was just really impressed with how welcoming they were. It's the largest ISSA chapter in the world. So if you're in the Denver area, I highly suggest you join that chapter. It just, everybody was welcoming. There wasn't, sometimes you go to some groups and there's like, you just feel kind of like a fish out of water. You feel like you're not part of the group.
Right. They
instantly made me feel part of the group, which was super cool. Yeah. So, it was in Denver. I flew out in the morning, got there. The thing started at noon. I got there at 12:05. That's what I do. Yeah. I didn't waste any time. I took a lift there. It's funny because I was there to give an incident management workshop. And on the way there, one of our clients calls with an incident.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, this is good material.
Yeah, really.
So that incident, it was not very impactful, so I didn't have to, stop or anything. But it started out, you have 3 hours. 3 hours, man.
Yeah, but you think, you hear, oh my gosh, I got 3 hours. But then if you can get a good audience or a good group that actually has any sort of feedback, that goes so fast.
That's true. So it was, I'd say there was probably 100 people there. It was, I brought, 3 or 4 books in my book bag so I could, share with people that, I just kind of pick people out, people that, I think look good.
Participated?
No, looks.
Solely looks.
Yeah. Like, you look like a cool dude. I'll give you a book. No, it was totally what they did to participate. But anyway, so it was funny. We got there. Lunch was from 12 to 12:45. 1 o'clock was kind of the time to talk, 1 to 4. And during the introduction, it's funny how some people think you're more like famous than others, than you actually are. Because it was funny because she started off with like, yeah, and we're so, excited to have Evan Francine here. And how many of you guys have heard of Evan before, read his book? One person raised their hand out of 100 people.
Puts you in your place. Grounds you.
Oh, I love it. I'm already grounded. You know that. So I was just like, all right, well, I said, you're going to get 3 hours to know me now, Right. So it was, we started off, we did a lot of the trick, I think, for a 3-hour workshop where really it's not, it turns out it's not really a workshop either. Because when I think of a workshop, I'm like, all right, everybody get open open your laptops. We're going to work through some problems. And so I sort of I didn't do a lot of upfront on this thing. But I wrote my presentation sort of like that, like we were going to work together.
Right. Yeah, I was looking through it. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Nobody brought their laptop, so I was like, all right, here we go. And it was cool because I think they were all, I did a lot of truth stuff, just kind of laying it down. I mean, this is what the current state is of incident response in our industry. This is, most organizations, that I see, you can read studies, but you always have to take every study you read with a grain of salt. Like, who sponsored this thing?
Right. What's
the sample error rate? Don't just take your things spoon-fed and believe them as truth, right? So, based on what I've seen, what you see too, I mean, just a lot of people, most people don't have an incident management program.
No.
And so, I kind of laid out, here are the numbers. Here's what the industry says. This is what I see. So, kind of to just get us level set there was some interesting interaction during that part of the talk, because that's sort of where I started, where people debated, the numbers. Well, it just seems low. It seems high. I'm like, these aren't my studies.
Right.
I said, if these were my studies, you'd all agree with it.
I was wondering what so you've got, top 10 statistics in there, and mean time to identify a data breach is 197 days.
Right.
And yeah, it's probably about right. Although sometimes you get lucky, right? We had the one we were talking about last week that happened. They identified it within a week.
Right.
However, that was kind of easy because their MSP, they switched MSPs and the MSP forgot to turn on the firewall.
Yeah.
Oops.
Any. Yeah. Well, and it depends on what you define to as a breach, right? I mean, if it's a ransomware attack, yeah, it's not 197 days. It's like 197 seconds, maybe.
Right. Well, you'll see. Actually, we've seen it quite a few times where they get in and they've been in for a while before they launch, right? It's okay. We've gotten what we can out of it. Now it's time to.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, no two attacks are the same. There's common characteristics for sure. And I think one of the classic errors that people make when they respond to an incident is they make assumptions. They make assumptions based on other attacks.
Right.
We think that the attacker was going this way or that way, whereas just being objective about it and letting the evidence take you where it takes you,
Right.
Because I think, to assume is a dangerous thing,
Right. Yeah. That's one of the, excuse me, one of the things we talk about in every single call, that comes in for an incident is, okay, well, we think this is what you've told us, this is what we know. Mm-hmm. However, we're not going to make any assumptions. We're going to investigate. Right. We're going to look and see, because as soon as we start making those assumptions, you miss things, right? You've tainted your thought process to okay, I'm only looking for this. Mm-hmm. And now if it turns out that's all it was, that's great, but
right.
you can't go in with that thought, that mindset.
No, not at all. And so this, the workshop was about, planning. So how do you plan for an incident response? How do you plan for an incident? So it's not how do you conduct an investigation? How do you conduct, how do you do forensics? That's part of the plan. I mean, knowing how you're going to do that.
Who do I call? Which I do is part of it. Yeah.
But I don't have to have necessarily an incident. I mean, I don't necessarily have to have a forensic investigator on staff to have a good incident management plan, right?
Well, and I mean, realistically, for the majority of companies, it's not something that they could do.
Right. Or afford to just have sitting on the bench, right?
That it may happen.
Yeah. So it was, planning for an incident. How do you prepare your environment? What's the proper, how do I set logs? How do I protect the logs? Mm-hmm. We go into so many incidents where, there's just no evidence. And it doesn't matter how good you are at forensics. If there's no evidence, there's no evidence.
Right.
We don't just make stuff up. There's no magic pill. It's either there or it's not.
Right. We had that reminded me, one of our newer analysts was going through doing an assessment for someone, and they were arguing with them about the SIM solution and the fact that it was running as domain admin, and that was, he's like, that's no bad. And
right.
they're like, but it's easier to manage. And,
Well, and those are some of the things that we can learn from previous incidents. The typical, if they're, as much as there is something, the typical attack sequence, right, includes, certainly in an attacker with any sophistication, the destruction of logs, the destruction of evidence, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so if I have the same authentication with the SIM solution that I do for the domain, if the domain admin account or accounts are a target, which they probably will, because another thing in a typical attack sequence is to elevate privileges, that puts my logs at risk.
Right. Well, yeah, because the first thing they're going to do is, hide where they're at.
And I love the people that say, well, that's never going to happen. It's like, okay, it's all right.
All right. Well,
sure.
We'll talk to you at some point. It's going to.
Well, and we've seen, the sad thing is, every time there's an incident, every time we plan poorly, somebody suffers that didn't need to suffer.
Right.
Including companies going out of business.
Right.
I mean, that's in our own recent practice. We've seen companies not be able to survive.
Right.
So that's the sad thing. And so we kind of went through the truth, laid it out there and hopefully, motivated some people. And then I went into, an assessment tool that Crest provides free. I love free. And
it seems like a pretty good tool too.
It really is. I mean, I've been through that tool before. There's 2 versions of the tool. So, and if you want to look at all this stuff, it's, you can go to my blog, evanfrancine.com. And I just posted yesterday afternoon, a summary of this ISSA event, including where you can get all the materials, the presentation, the 2 tools, the Crest assessment tools, some sample stuff, from our own practice here. And, but so we went through the tools and I said, it doesn't matter where you're at in your incident response plan. You need to do assessments regularly just to assess, how robust your plan actually is. Because even if you don't have anything documented, you still have an incident response plan. It's not like an incident happens and you're just going to stop doing anything.
Right.
You have a plan. Your plan might suck, but there's a plan, right? Your plan might be to update your resume and go try to find another job. But you have a plan, whether it's documented, whether it's repeatable, whether other people can participate in it. I mean, all those other things that's why we, try to make it better. So, yeah, we went through the assessment tool. I told people, go through the detailed one. Don't go through the summary one. The summary is too subjective. What's the official name of it? Crest Cybersecurity Incident
I just had it up.
Response Maturity Tool or something like that.
Hang on.
But it's a good tool. So go through that. And so I challenged all of them. I said, so many times when we sit here, we give a talk and you see a bunch of head nodding, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you saw here. I mean, everybody's nodding their head. Everybody's in agreement. There was a few, good questions, but generally, everybody in the room agreed. And I get sort of tired of people just agreeing, nodding their heads. And then as soon as they leave the presentation or the workshop,
nothing happens.
Nothing, right? And so I said, we're here at an ISSA chapter. We're all part of this group. So why don't we do something like this? Pair up, find somebody that will hold you accountable to just doing at least the assessment, right? It's free.
Yeah.
It's going to take you, might take you 6 hours, but you're going to be grateful that you did it, and maybe bring together your team, get different perspectives, debate, some of those characteristics that are assessed in that tool. And come up with a plan. Figure out what you're doing. Come up with a plan for the plan.
Right.
And so that went really well. And then I shared just kind of some, some stories. There was lots of stories along the way, of incidents that we've responded to.
Yeah,
which people like.
People, yeah, they do. They but it kills me. They love the stories, but still are like, that'll never happen to me.
Right. Yeah.
How many stories do we have where it's like...
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Some of these stories were people like you. You know what I mean? People sitting out there in the audience nodding their head, being entertained by the story, and then you realize, oh my God, I'm a story now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always wonder if we talk through these stories, we tell them, and, we keep the companies that we're working with, it's confidential, right? We don't talk to give away information that would
we're supposed to do that?
At least on the podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've been tweeting them.
Yeah, well, but
it's good.
You always wonder if somebody's going to hear themselves,
yeah,
as an example and what they would do.
Yeah, even though we keep it anonymous. If you're the person we're talking about, you know who we're talking about.
How would that make you feel? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, yeah. So that was, and then we finished up with just some sample, what an incident response plan looks like, how to operationalize it. It's one thing to create a plan, check the box. And I actually started kind of with that too. I said, if you're here, you have to figure out your why, right? I'm a big why guy. If your why for incident response planning is to be compliant, to check the box, you can leave.
Yeah.
Why waste 3 hours here?
Right. You can go download a plan and say, oh, well, we're all set.
Yeah. And that was one of the truths too. It was like, if that's your why, I can give you a template now, put your logo on it, and you're done.
Right.
If your why is you really do want to be prepared for an incident should it occur and, all that stuff, well, then stick around. And I think everybody did. I don't think I saw anybody like, oh, okay, I can leave.
Peace.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And I had to use 2 dad jokes for 3 hours. That's not too bad. To keep them engaged.
I was going to say that I think the plus is you can do some stories in there, right? Yeah. So you can kind of weave those in. Yeah.
Yeah. We took one break at like 2:15. We started at 2:15. We were done at 4. Some really, really good questions, some good... Afterwards, they clapped for me twice, which was weird. I don't know why that was.
He's done, yay.
Yeah, probably. Oh, is he leaving? Yes. And then, there's maybe a dozen people afterwards that we just talked. And then I had to run, which I felt bad about because I would have, had I done this again, I would have stayed the night. So I could have had dinner with some of the people and, maybe
you flew in, did the event and flew out that same.
Yeah, I had no time. I got a lift from the airport to there, got there at 12:05, got a lift at 4 for my flight leaving, I think at like 6 maybe.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
It's tough.
Yeah, but it was overall, man, it was really, really good. And it was because of the quality of the people that were there. It wasn't, it was just a great group. I loved it, every minute of it. And hopefully they learned some things about incident response. I know that afterwards there were lots of downloads of the materials.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I made that available to everybody.
Very good. So, when we're talking, incident response and, let me see. How do I want to put this? Yeah, there's a lot of plans out there. Right?
Plans. Yeah.
A lot of templates, a lot of things. How do we tell? I'm thinking of this as the end user. How do we know what's a good plan? How do we know? How can you tell the difference between something that's overly complicated versus maybe something that's overly simplified?
Right.
What makes a good plan?
Well, just looking at the plan, I don't think you can tell all that much. You can see that if it has the common sort of sections and structure, but it seems like it needs to be socialized. So, last week I was in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And we developed their plan. We've been working on their plan. It's operational, but it was obvious. So we did a few tabletop exercises while we were there. We was like, hey, it's been, a month or two since the plan was, sort of put in place. Let's go through some scenarios, just as the security team. We don't need to bring a bunch of people in here. Let's just talk through it. And so we talked through the first one that we talked through. I like to start with, what was the first indicator of something? Was a wrong, was a miss? And then try to figure out how would that get into our process? Like, how would we know about this thing? So take for instance, unauthorized charges on credit cards in a retail environment or in a kind of distributed environment, how would we know? Well, okay, so you start playing that out. Okay, well, you get 10 calls, or this retail site gets 10, 15 calls, 20 calls, whatever, from clients claiming that their cards have been fraudulently charged.
Okay.
Right? Okay, great. So then what happens next? So the person who received that call, what would they do?
Right.
Well, they would whatever. So we started playing through that, and we realized that that in a couple of these scenarios that they would never, ever get into our incident response process because we would never have found out. So that told me, well, we need to communicate then. We need to socialize this better. So we need to reach out to these people that are in these other locations and let them know and keep them aware that this is where you report incidents. These are common incidents that you need to be aware of. And if you get one of these calls, call the service desk or call the security team or email this email address. So that's one way, is just kind of is tabletopping it, playing through the scenario. That's, so I always think of like socializing and operationalizing. If it's socialized, meaning everybody knows about it, and it's operationalized, meaning it'll actually function.
That's good. I think with the tabletop, one of the things that you can do your own, it's always good, but I think having, an independent facilitator really helps. And I think the biggest reason is, and it's, not that anybody's trying to, quote unquote cheat or anything, but you make assumptions, right?
Right.
It's, oh, well, I know I would do this, or these things are in place, but nobody calls it out. And it's not in the plan anywhere. So, with an independent person, right, you go, oh, time out. How did you get from A to F?
Right.
Where that's not in the plan.
Yeah. And that's why I love doing them too. I call it bookending. So, I had done, so in defining how we're going to do a test, first I start with kind of like what's the source. So let's say GitHub source code gets compromised. Well, how would that potentially happen? Well, even if they have two-factor authentication, maybe there's a phishing attack. Maybe it's a disgruntled developer.
It could be the user clicks on okay, that's mine, just go away, which we've seen.
Right. But even in two-factor, I could still do a SIM swap, right? I mean, there could be.
We had the one incident where they had multi-factor enabled, and somebody got the password and kept spamming, trying to log in, and the user was just like, "Yes, go away," even though it wasn't him logging in.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
So it goes back to
user
error, not paying attention.
Right, and so bookending that. So if I'm going to identify the source, and then how would you potentially find out about that? A source code compromise. And then bring that all the way to, so you have the source, and then how would we find out? And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the middle. So present to the development team or whoever's going to be, involved in this tabletop exercise. Here's what we know, right? Secret Service called, found, a database of customer information that appears to be from you, or maybe it's the, UK Information Commissioner's Office or somebody, right? You get this call, go. What happens? Because you already identified the source, so you know kind of where you want them to eventually get to.
Right.
But watching them work through the path of, they should get there, according to, kind of following the structure of the plan, you should get there in, maybe hours. But, when you're sitting there going through the tabletop exercise and you find out like, oh my God, you guys are never going to get there.
Right.
And then, modifying those plans to fit them better or do training,
Well, I think that the hardest part is getting them to not just jump to assumptions and actually talk through, okay, what are you doing? Or what are you doing next? No, you don't get to just say, we're doing, the antivirus found it. So
right.
We know, well, okay, no, let's go through every step. What happens when it gets alerted? Who looks at it? How did you know that was the issue?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's interesting because, it's interesting that you chose incident response for this podcast because, I guess I didn't really realize it until, I saw your show notes that, I had the incident response workshop last week when I was working with that, the global company. We're talking about incident response and doing some tabletop exercises. I have another one with another global company where we had to design 2 tabletop exercises. And in September, we have the next Hacks and Hops, which is incident response. You guys have been working on an incident response thing.
Yeah. So, well, and that was part of it. I won't lie. It was part of the reason we chose this is we kind of breaking the news here.
Yeah.
We will be rolling out a new incident response management, retainer service.
Yep.
So that's a big part of, kind of why we chose that to kind of roll into that as well. But
yeah, so incident response is like everywhere right now. I guess I didn't really, until I took a step back, didn't realize like that's all I've been doing like lately, even though didn't even realize that's all I was doing.
What's crazy is I think February was the worst month for that. I think we had at one point, I had 5 active IRs that were in various stages of identification to kind of close out status. But, we're easily getting 2 or 3, a month of incidents going on where we need to come in and do some sort of either, clean up at the end or active.
Yeah. Yeah. And read the
response.
News, right? Baltimore.
Again.
Yeah. Right. It's like, my God. So, I'm happy about the way you guys did the new incident response retainer service for FRSecure, because we pulled that back, right? Our initial sort of play on that didn't fit exactly right,
Right.
But this new one, I really like the way you guys put it together. You and Oscar, the lead for technical services here. So I'm excited to see how that works out. I'm excited to see the value that clients get and, really help them out.
Hopefully it works. I think, we pretend we know what we're doing. No. I think we've got a pretty good plan, right? And a lot of it is around trying to prepare clients that they don't need us for that, right? It's, hey, we're there. It's an insurance situation.
Well, and you guys definitely know what you're doing. When you got you from the, kind of the planning administrative perspective, with the technical background, and then you've got Oscar, who has plenty of experience,
right.
In incident response, in big companies. It's a very good service and plan. I'm excited. Yeah, I think
it'll be good.
And you know how I roll, man. If I didn't think it was going to provide service, we wouldn't do it.
Right.
Right. If there's no value.
Well, and so we'll go through kind of, when you look at this, the steps are, identification is clearly that you got to start there. And I think in March when you were out, when we kicked you out, I spoke with Renee about this a little bit. Yeah. And it kind of ties, luckily it matches up with what we talked about back then. But identification, this is where we have to figure out what exactly are we dealing with, and prioritizing and saying, okay, what's the severity of the incident? And do you have a formal way to actually do that and making a consistent, classification every time?
Right.
I think a lot of people struggle with that because everybody goes, oh, it's critical immediately.
Well, I've been being in enough incidents, a couple of things. One, people don't make the greatest decisions. They're not in the right frame of mind to make really good decisions.
No.
So judgment comes into
panic.
Yeah. And I also know, in dealing with enough incidents that people don't read. So having objective criteria where, just selecting certain things about an event or an incident, then having it automatically classify is really important because then important for a couple of reasons. One, you don't call my judgment into question, which, I may classify something totally different than you would, and we both have experience, right? Bring somebody who's a novice, who's never done this before. How will they classify it?
Make it as objective as possible, not, take as much of the subjectivity out of it as we can.
Yep. And then use colors, big, bold, bright colors, because if something's a high, make it as red as possible so that people, when I don't have to read to see that this is high. It's red.
I know.
So go to the other red parts.
Yeah. And so we've really come down to, we have 4 priority levels that we've identified. And as we work with people to build out their plans, this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And, I think when we do it, we did, P1, we've classified that as a critical incident or a likely breach. Okay. And that's a very, the wording is very intentional. Mm-hmm. So when you hear it's a P1, everybody always, I think, thinks their problem is always the most important.
Yeah.
But when you say, okay, it's a critical incident, okay, so you're telling me you've likely had a breach. Now you've got people's attention. Oh, no, I don't want to have a breach, right? So it makes them, I think, stop and think a little bit about, okay, what is this level? Is it truly drop everything right now and go? Now, examples of that, ransomware, I think absolutely, right? You've been
P1'd.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Denial of service attack where you're down hard, some things like that. You've maybe gotten unauthorized access and you've verified, like this one that we were talking about, they came in last week and somebody's machine was logged in and locked within a user account that they didn't know. And it's a relatively small company. So they knew this is not an employee.
Right.
Well, that's unauthorized access to your information. Mm-hmm. P2 being a serious incident or a possible breach. So, all right, my guess is a lot of them are going to fall into that P2. Right? We don't know for sure, but we feel like there's the possibility that we've been breached. Brute force attacks, social engineering, maybe a malware outbreak, but not ransomed where we're locked out.
Right.
P3, moderate event, low likelihood of a breach. So,
So did you say P2?
P2.
So that's if we both drank a lot of water.
Yeah.
I'd have to P2.
There you go.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Well, you do have just the one kidney, so I don't know how that works.
I know, right? Still, it works awesome.
Oh, okay.
You only need one. Sorry, you're on P3.
P3 is a low likelihood of a breach, and P4 is a security event or non-incident. And I think it was important that we included. Oh, nope, it's just an event in the classification. And there's maybe
So you coach them through the characteristics to classify, right?
Yep, and building out a plan, and
because even the word like data breach, people debate. I don't think everybody knows what breach means.
True.
Oh, that's not a breach. Well, but half your customer database is online. I think that's a breach. Well, define breach. Oh God, really?
Right. Well, and that's a big part of the plan is defining an event versus an incident, and then defining what really each of these mean.
Yeah, because it just sucks in an incident response when we're sitting here debating terms and words.
Right. You guys are completely down, and you don't understand.
Right. Come on. I don't know. It might be a P3. Yeah. But that also, emphasizes the importance of preparation and testing, right?
Right. Yeah. And
so we're not debating these things.
So part of our service would be, you get a dedicated IR, like a virtual IR manager.
Nice.
And it's going through the plan and it's doing a tabletop.
Does the virtual IR manager get to carry a taser?
I don't see why not.
Excellent. I would like to be a virtual IR manager.
But yeah, so going through the plan, coaching them, making sure we're on the same page, that speaking the same language, right? So if something happens, are we both on the same page and understanding what each other is saying? Once we get through the plan, we'll do an annual tabletop, walking through it, understanding it, just ongoing touch points, just to where are we at with this stuff? What's the latest things going on? Where are you at with making progress on your logging? Right? It's not an overnight thing.
Oh, no. I mean, in order to really prepare your environment for an incident, it's a lot of work, right? I mean, you should have standardized configurations for a lot of your systems and servers, standardized logging settings, making sure you're logging the right information. You're keeping it long enough.
Yeah. I think,
and it's not just create the plan and be done with it, right?
I was like dropping when you go in to talk to people about it, and they're like, yeah, we got good logging. You're an Active Directory Windows environment? Yeah. Do you have PowerShell logging turned on? What do you mean?
Right. Yeah, it'd probably be good.
Microsoft doesn't log that by default. You have to turn it on. Oh.
Well, yeah. And if you talk to, like Jake Williams, Malware Jake, on Twitter, he's taught at SANS for years on, DFIR. The guy knows what he's talking about. And every once in a while, he'll drop a good nugget of, preparing an environment for an incident. Yeah. And he would, he's got all kinds of good stuff about proper log settings, right? Mm-hmm. And you just hit on one. Yeah. If it's not logged, this is what I told him too in Denver. You can't just make up evidence. It's either there or it's not.
Right.
If you're not collecting the evidence, it's not there.
Right.
That's just it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't. And
there's no pixie dust, and a DFIR analyst or whatever doesn't have a vial of pixie dust that they bring with them in their, forensic toolkit.
Right. Yeah. Guess what? It doesn't exist. I can't tell you what happened.
Yeah. And that's hard to get people to get, which then brings us back to, and this is where I hit, numerous times too with these people in Denver, was just asset management.
Yeah.
There's asset management again, and everybody loves asset management, right?
I think
because nobody's doing it.
Yeah. I think the problem is people do 2/3 of it, right? We've talked about this
which
in
is
the past.
Good. I'll take 2/3 over no thirds.
Yeah. They'll get hardware and maybe software, but the data assets are always, we kind of know where things are,
right.
But we know our laptops and what's installed, or, servers or hardware, where we have it. But yeah, I'm going to talk myself out of it, because even then it's like, okay, so that's great. Where it is,
right.
Who's the owner?
Right.
Right.
And other things too to inventory in the environment. You certainly have the hardware, software, and data. But like an identity and access management perspective too. Do you have an inventory of your accounts?
Do you know who's? Yeah.
Privilege access management in too many organizations is just
non-existent.
Terrible. Right. Well, an attacker, what do you think an attacker is going to go after? It's your privileged accounts.
Yeah. What blows my mind is I put in place in, 2011, 2012, monitoring for, right, domain admin group, backup operator, like all those privileged account thing. And it was just like, well, this is what you do.
Right.
It just blows my mind that we're here 7 years later and people still don't get it. And it was, I don't know. I don't want to sound it. It was the right. It's what you do. How do you not monitor this stuff?
You're starting to sound like me now. See, you're getting fired up. What did I do to you?
I don't know. IR stuff.
Am I rubbing off on you?
I know.
No, I agree, man. It
just blows my mind, though.
Well, that's like last week's podcast, right? You're listening to Loft, give that testimony
20 years ago, and it could have been.
We're still talking about some of the same things, man. Yeah, and then we just keep adding stuff.
It's just, I don't know. This is what gets me going is,
and some people do good jobs, right? I have seen good incident response plans.
Oh, yeah.
I have seen good incident response teams. That's awesome. We need more. If you're a small to mid-sized company, which is usually the ones that don't have good ones.
Yeah. And the majority of our calls come in from, 20-person company to a couple hundred people.
Too, because regulators, the checkbox people, we're pushing really hard on disaster recovery.
Right. But not IR.
Right. Which is like, but I may never get to my DR because, there's a gap in between.
And what's more likely to happen?
Right.
Catastrophic failure of...
Yeah, so drop your DR right now and get your IR done.
Yeah.
And do them independently, too. That was another tip that I gave them. Even though your IR and your DR need to be integrated with each other, build them independently and then marry them together.
And see where the misses are.
Well, yeah,
and then fill the gaps.
Yeah, because what happens is I see a lot of people developing an incident response plan, thinking about the disaster recovery plan, or vice versa, and then they never actually get it done because they get so wrapped around the axle about this or that. Just create your IR, create your DR, marry them up afterwards, right? The integration between the two plans.
Yeah.
Because you'll have different audiences probably creating those plans too, right? Some will be crossovers.
You'll have some, but
it's good. And seriously, we could talk about IR for days.
I think we'll still, we'll definitely be talking more over the summer.
Yeah, I think I have an incident response testing exercise this week or maybe next.
So what do you use for that? Because I always liked using...
my brain.
Your brain. I liked using was it NIST 861 R2, the Appendix A or whatever. Yeah. And starting with that and then customizing it for the organization. Right. Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. This one that I prepared, we just talked it out. What kind of scenario would it be applicable? What would be really impactful to your business? And we created both of these ones. Actually, it's 3: custom, and then kind of bookended. That's what I was saying before. So, created what's a potential compromise or a threat that could compromise something that would be impactful enough to where you would call this an incident. And in this case, we chose. Compromise of your source code. Okay. Right? This is a large corporate. That's
a big deal.
Yeah, and this is a large environment. And how would you know about it? So if we're going to go there, because we wanted to get the attention of the developers and kind of some of their practices, some of their DevSecOps stuff.
Right.
So we started with that compromise, and then how blew that up to where would we find out? What would a potential impact be? And here it was. Basically, it affects all their stores across the globe. This thing, because they have this code, and I don't want to, give off too much to who it is, but their source code one of their applications controls door access. Gotcha. Globally.
Yeah, that would be a problem if I got out.
Right. So the scenario is a disgruntled developer who understands access. Who understands the code, and it's not and if you know developers, it's not hard to disgruntle one sometimes. I can disgruntle a developer pretty fast. So a disgruntled developer wants to get back at them. So this is a person that would then know the culture, know a phishing attack that might be more successful than another one.
Right.
So he's going to phish another developer, already knows source code, may already have a backdoor built to just,
He just needs that last piece.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the scenario we're going to walk through this week. And what I'm going to start with is you're getting thousands of calls from every store across the globe that nobody can get access into their, or, you start with whatever part of the world is going to call first, which I assume to be like Australia or something. I don't know. We'll So yeah, I do like the NIST stuff. I think, as your incident response planning gets more sort of sophisticated, then it's time to start creating some of those custom test scripts.
No, but I'm thinking, I like to use it because if you haven't looked at it, for those that haven't, it's really good because it's got questions around it, around kind of, and so it gives you a good scenario and all that. And I like to use it and say, walk through it, and then at the end come back to those questions and say, okay, did we answer this? Did we answer this? Did we answer this? And kind of make sure that we've hit all of the main points. So
no, yeah, it's definitely good guidance.
So, all right, well, there you go. Incident response. So much we struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you're a logical thinker who thinks step by step by step, which I guess would be serial too, but logic for sure, it's easier.
I think one of the things that makes good for being a good incident responder, when you hit an incident, it's chaos, right? And
yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Well, a lot of times, especially when customers are calling in or you're dealing with things, because you don't know, especially at the beginning, right? You don't know what's going on, and finding those people that can it slows down. And I always enjoyed the chaos, because then it's okay.
Oh yeah,
put it together and
you
stay calm in it.
You know the saying, right? I mean, this is my panic face,
right? This
is my super exciting face. I mean, it's just. Which is nice when you go to an incident response.
Calming.
Yeah.
For everyone. Yeah. You're like, ah.
Right.
Well, you're totally boned. Huh?
Yeah. Well, I have said before, you might have been in that incident. Right. Joked. I was like, all right, so step one of our plan, everybody's got their resumes updated.
Yeah. You told me about that.
That didn't go over well last time. It's gone over well before, but obviously it's a joke, because you got to loosen things up. Sometimes you got to like break things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Chill. Just relax a second. It's like, it'd be nice if you could walk in like a glass of cold water and just splash it on somebody's face, who's freaking out.
Yeah.
But you can't do that.
No.
I don't think. Taser. Well, we're going to do tasers, right?
If they're not calming down, just tase them.
Yeah. There. You look calm now.
All right. So quick hit on some news. These were pretty interesting. So they've come out with another exploit for Notepad to pop a shell off of threat post. I thought that was interesting to read. Not anything. I don't know what we can really do about it, but.
Well, and there's still a lot of debate on what how exploitable it actually is.
Right.
Because Notepad is so, it doesn't have a lot of functionality, right? There's no decom. There's no,
it's still kind of fun to read.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely fun to read. And I think it's newsworthy. And I thought, as you read that post or read that article, so it's Tavis Ormandy, part of the Google Project Zero is the one. And he posted on LinkedIn, am I the first one to pop a shell in Notepad? And I thought it was interesting because Shawuki Bekrar, he's what is he from? He's from, Zerodium. They buy 0 days, right?
Right.
He's like, well, no, you're not the first person, but you're the first person that reported it to Microsoft. And I just thought, what a jerk kind of.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, it's just no, you're not the first one. We were,
Right. Yeah. Well, it goes back to the whole ego thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago or whatever.
Right. I mean, the guy's excited he found something and he gets to report it. And he did go through responsible disclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's whatever. This is the political stuff, in our industry. But, it's interesting. Dan Kaminsky, who, is a sort of a pioneer in a lot of respects in our field, had some good comments on it too.
Yeah. It's a good read. It's interesting to kind of read the, basically ends up being a memory corruption, but yeah, it's good.
And did you hear the name he was going to give it? So,
oh yeah,
he was asked by, Ormandy was asked what he would call the bug.
Notepad.
Notepad. Seriously. Well, if it's got a name, it exists, I guess.
There you go. Second one is definitely a little bit scarier. Over almost 1 million devices vulnerable to Blue Keep, which is the Windows RDP wormable vulnerability that was released. Microsoft released a patch in May. Still over almost 1 million devices. Now, again, it doesn't seem like a lot, it seems like a lot, but it's a small percentage of devices. But 1 million exploitable, wormable,
right?
That's a little scary.
Well, and we see a lot of configurations too, where RDP is actually on, it's exposed to the internet, but it's on an internal network too, right? Where there are maybe hundreds,
right,
of other RDP systems. So
yeah,
this doesn't account for those internal systems that are all.
If you get in vulnerable. Now, all of a sudden, right. This is internet facing 1 million machines.
Yeah, and I thought. The Blue Keep scanner project, and now it's in Metasploit. So, this is a module in Metasploit for testing. Only affects XP, Vista, and Windows 7 machines. Windows 8 and 10 boxes are not affected. But it also affects Windows Server 2003 and 2008 systems. 2008 systems, I think, are still in to the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
Are still in support.
2020 maybe. So.
But this was big enough for Microsoft to issue an actual patch for Windows XP.
Yeah.
And Vista. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Patch or upgrade. Or isolate. If you can't patch or upgrade, then isolate.
Right. Yeah. Turn off RDP.
Right, and if you have to have RDP on, then use some network level authentication or block
something.
it.
Yeah, I think 1 million. Anyway, people have that many people RDP open to the internet. It's that anyway.
Well, yeah, I don't.
I'm a grumble.
Having RDP open to the internet alone is like somebody should slap your wrist.
Yeah,
if that's like the only architecture that would work. Then two-factor authentication and, make sure it's updated, make sure it's patched. Anything you're putting on the internet better be hardened, right?
I think, wasn't Blue Keep, it basically doesn't matter if you have the multi-factor.
No, it doesn't, but it does matter if it's patched.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, hardening those systems. But if you have an RDP system that is patched, that's using single-factor, expect that to be tipped too.
Yeah.
Those are such attractive targets.
Yeah. We had somebody argue with us on a pen test that having RDP was open to the internet wasn't a high risk because they had multi-factor. We're like,
well,
this was like
lesser high risk maybe, but high risk still.
But it was, it's still a high risk. It's still a risk. There's other options. Anyway.
Right.
All right.
So I just wonder when that exploit is coming.
Oh, I know.
And then it hits because
that's going to be
it's already there. It just hasn't gone yet. Excuse me.
Next couple here. 93% of companies are overconfident of their ability to stop data breaches. This is from InfoSecurity magazine, and it was talking more about privileged access management abuse. But I think they said 80% of organizations were found not to have a mature approach to combating PAM cyber attacks, but 93% of those organizations surveyed believe they were somewhat prepared. Mm-hmm. So, let's see. They don't take the simplest of measures, saying they don't use 52% said they don't use a password vault. And they said they did 1,300 organizations across 11 verticals. 43% were identified having quote unquote non-existent PAM approach. So, well,
yeah.
Good luck.
Those are the keys to the kingdom, people.
And nuts.
Yeah. Well, it takes work, and I think, a lot of there's a lot of things take a lot of work, and, it comes down to doing a good assessment, prioritizing your approach, and not being afraid to do work. Stop looking for easy buttons on everything. You're actually going to have to work, believe it or not.
Yeah. I see. This is where I get.
And some people might get offended. Some people might be resistant. But you just have, that's part of our game, right? Is working around through those things to get them to happen.
Yeah. But
I mean, I get it, man.
If you do it, going back, I was using password vaults for Surface accounts and domain, level accounts, backup accounts 7 years ago. Come on. There's no excuse at this point. Anyway.
Well, in the study, I mean, I always look at these studies because I'm such a skeptic now. I mean, I'll probably always have been, but the study was also commissioned by, Centrify.
Well, yeah.
So
I'm sure they had some leading questions, but I mean, realistically, those numbers from what I've seen, it's probably not that far off. It's not surprising given
I agree.
What we see.
Yeah.
It's rare. And there's so many good options, and it doesn't have to be, it's work, but it's not. It's a lot less work than recovering from an incident.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah. For sure.
Anyway. All right. 2 more real quick. Checkers and rallies, victims of the data breach. This is on InfoSecurity magazine.
What's a data breach? Define breach. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Data security issues involving malware at certain locations. So, they had their point of sale system compromised. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have any checkers or rallies here in Minnesota, do we?
I don't think so. I know a lot more kind of in the South and lower Midwest.
Yeah. And these breaches, it's kind of funny now. Credit card breaches, it seems like nobody really cares anymore. But, because I don't have to pay anything as a victim, right? Directly out of my pocket. But the thing that people don't realize is that banks and financial institutions are not in the business of losing money.
It's going to get passed along.
Right. So they're going to raise fees, raise rates, something to cover those costs. So you should care because you pay more for stuff because of this.
Yeah.
So it's not like you stop going at checkers, but, start, I don't know, expecting some accountability somewhere for some of this.
You'd think. And then last one off of Naked Security, just a minor issue on this one, potentially. Unpatched Docker bug allows read-write access to host OS.
Oops. Yeah, that's another oops.
So
we should call this the Oops podcast.
There you go. But yeah, that was an interesting read if you want to kind of go through it. But basically the way that they let's see, I gotta find it here. There's a follow symlink in scope, which resolves file paths given to the Docker container system. So it basically created a race condition, and if you could interfere with that, you get read write as root user on the host OS. So,
yeah. Well, in the NVD, ranked the bug severity is high. But Docker security engineer Justin Cormack did put some context on it. So it's not like, run for the hills, but, be aware of it.
It exists. You have to know. But probably the likelihood is fairly low, but the impact would be really high.
It would suck.
So anyway, there we go. IR news.
That's it.
That is it. So I think, we could, as it says in the notes, we could talk IR every week.
Yeah.
And make us the IR podcast, but never run out of material, especially news stories. Because, gosh, it took me 5 minutes to find multiple breach reports. So,
which is good. It raises awareness, and sometimes you look at the news and you're like, oh my God, the sky is falling, but it's not.
No,
it's just there's just a lot of work to do, and some of that work is preparing for when these bad things happen. Don't be caught with your pants down.
No,
it sucks.
Do the hard work up front, and it's a lot less painful than
it pays dividends. And that was another thing. So if you just walk through the logic, right, that no matter what you do, you cannot prevent all bad things from happening. Right. Okay, so everybody agrees with that. So then what is your plan should something bad happen?
I'm calling you.
That was another question. Yeah, well, that was another question I had asked too. Is like, has anybody here been deposed?
Yeah, yeah.
And nobody in the audience raised their hand, and I was like, well, let me tell you what it's like. You know, you're sitting across from opposing counsel, and they're out asking you difficult questions about the series of events that took place. And one of the questions they might ask is, you realize that no matter what you do, you can't prevent all bad things from happening, correct? Correct. So knowing that, tell me about your incident response plan. I don't have one. Oh, and you call yourself an expert. Yeah, I mean, there's just all kinds of ways, you know, so build these things, do these things to the best of your ability to not only help your organization, the people that actually pay your salary, not to mention the customers who pay the company that pays your salary. But, yeah, I mean, think about yourself too, in terms of your defensibility. And I've heard some people say, well, I don't really care. I'll be fired anyway. That's a cop out, and someone should smack you for that.
No. Yeah, I would. Yeah. I'd recommend replacing that person sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and hopefully out of the industry.
Wow. All right. So thank you, Evan. Don't forget, you can follow myself or Evan on Twitter. I'm at Brad and and Evan is at Evan Francine. Yeah. And email us at unsecurity@protonmail.com as wrap, and have a great week.
Yeah, let's have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the UNSECURITY podcast. We value our listeners and would love to hear from you. Give us your feedback by emailing us at unsecurity@protonmail.com. That's UNSECURITY@PROTONMAIL.com. Be sure to tune in next week to hear the latest insights from Brad and Evan.